You know, it's funny how phone companies a lot of the time will tout a new feature as being only possible on the new hardware that they're trying to sell you that day, and that's usually not actually the case. Google's Magic Eraser is one such example of that comes to mind very quickly. When they announced Magic Eraser, which if you don't know is this nifty little tool that lets you erase things from your photos using AI magic, and it works very, very well. They announced it alongside the new Google Pixel device that was running the Tensor chipset, and they said this is only possible with the Google Tensor system on a chip. And shortly after that, it was kind of hacked and ported to some other devices. But these things were kind of hard to get working for the most part. Not there for, general consumption among most normal people. But today, that has finally changed because anyone, any Android user, and in fact, any iOS user of Google Photos can now access the Magic Eraser. There is but one prerequisite to this. They are now trying to sell you something else, which is Google's One membership. And I actually don't think Google One is like a bad deal. I already had Google One, and the biggest reason is because I needed more cloud storage. I've been using Google Photos for a really, really long time. And they only give you 15 gigs of storage to start out between that and Drive. Well, if you give them $2 a month, which really isn't a whole heck of a lot, you get 100 gigs of storage, which is a lot more than 15. And you also get a bunch of interesting features inside of your Google Photos app, one of which is now Magic Eraser. So let's take a look at Magic Eraser on the Microsoft Surface Duo of all devices. All right, so we are now inside Google Photos. We're going to take a look at some of the things you get for that Google One subscription, and we're going to, of course, look at Magic Eraser. So the first thing you got to do is click on that little edit button down there, and you may notice that some things have had this little One logo on them, and that is because it was locked behind the Google One paywall. So this is the dynamic filter. Sometimes it looks good. Sometimes it's a little over the top. On some phones, you might want to call it like your Samsung filter a little bit because it's going to do a pretty good job of, as you can see there, just kind of pushing up the contrast, pushing up the colors a bit. And yeah, it does an okay job. Let's turn that back off. If we move down here at the bottom, though, you can go over here to Tools, and you'll see a couple of things like Blur and Magic Eraser. So Blur is probably going to be a terrible thing to try and use on this because what you do is you click on an object, and it's going to try to, as best it can, apply a portrait blur to that object. Okay, so this is a terrible one to try and do this on because there's really nothing properly in the foreground, but I've seen it do an okay job at times. Magic Eraser, though, is right next to that. Well, what can you do with Magic Eraser? First off, it's going to look for suggestions, and for some reason it wants to erase this little table up here, which we don't actually want to do that. What we're going to try to erase is this rose bush here. So what you do is you just take your finger and you draw around that object, and it should do its best to try and figure out what the object was and then erase it. And you can see there, it did an okay job. This is typically not meant for something that's like in the very center of the photo. It's meant for things that are kind of ancillary and off to the side. Let's get rid of this rock here. That might be a better example. Okay, that did a pretty decent job there. But you can see what it's kind of generally meant for. Now, there's another option down there that says Camouflage, and what that does is rather than erasing an object, it sort of dulls the colors a bit to just make it easier to forget it's there. So we'll try that on this one. Let's go to Camouflage, and let's try and camouflage this flower, and let's see how good of a job it does of picking that out. And you can see exactly what I mean. It didn't get rid of it, it just dulled it a little bit. So you can imagine if this wasn't the focal point, now it's going to like draw your attention less. It is camouflaged. Personally, I do actually think that there are better applications to do this than just using Google Photos. There's an application called Retouch, which I think is fantastic and has a lot of more advanced features than what Google Photos has there. However, I will not lie to you and tell you that if Google Photos is just there, if Magic Eraser is just inside Google Photos, I'm probably going to use it a bit more because it's just going to be really simple and easy, convenient for me to use. You also have to question here, what does this mean for Google? Was this the right call for them to make? How are people going to receive this, right? Because we were told this was a Pixel exclusive feature that was you had to have the Tensor to do this, and now, of course, it is now openly known that that's not the case. Have people just forgotten about that messaging? Maybe they have, and maybe Google's thinking, hey, we're going to sell more $2 a month subscriptions by virtue of adding this feature. Let me know if it's something you would pay $2 for. Maybe it's a tipping point. Maybe you were thinking about paying $2 for the excessive storage, and now with Magic Eraser, it's going to push you over that. I kind of have a hard time believing anybody would pay $2 just thinking about Magic Eraser, but maybe in a totality of features, that might be enough. Let me know what you think about this in the comments down below. Is Magic Eraser something that you're going to use now that it is part of the Google One subscription on any device, Android or iOS? This should be rolling out over time, so if you don't see it yet, you should see it very, very soon. Let me know in the comments down below, guys. I'll see you in the next one, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.